Thank you, Jimmy. Well, that one should be, I think, we should have more people fighting on that one because we are speaking about the core tenets of our groups, self-custody. And the battle is to know if self-custody is for hippies or heroes. So basically, well, are we all right when we do self-custody, or did we get something wrong? And well, self-custody is not for us. So I will call to the ring. I think, yeah, you can come. I will call Julien and Seb to the ring. Please enter. Please enter. Please take a mic.
Are you ready?
So yeah, I feel maybe we all might be a little bit biased because even the jingle was advertising for Julien. So as you can say, Julien is ready, yeah, because well, he's
always.
There. And Seb on the left is from Cordial Systems. So I think maybe you can introduce yourself quickly, and then we can start the fight. Let's start with you because it's your first Blockfighter.
Yes, that's right. My first time here in the block fighting arena. So I would say take it easy, but that makes it not so entertaining. But yeah, so co-founder of Cordial Systems. I've been spending the last several years focusing on the custody space, mainly from an institutional lens. So that's what I'll be calling upon as part of the discussion today. And yeah, I'll leave it at that and not shield the company too hard.
And I'm Julien, one of the co-founders at Ready. We used to be known as Argent, but we recently rebranded. For those of you who know us, we've basically built the first smart contract wallet on Ethereum. As far as 2018, we invented stuff like social recovery, meta-transaction, and all these good things that are finally becoming cool and used on Ethereum. So we've always been opinionated about self-custody, about the fact that self-custody is a core property of blockchain. That's something that we should cherish and preserve. And through our technical choices, we are putting self-custody at risk in many situations. And because of this opinion, Nicola is inviting me every year as a representative of self-custody in Blockfighters. Usually I'm fighting Eric from Fireblocks. Actually, I met him yesterday and was very disappointed not to be invited. But at the same time, he recognized that I basically won every single year, that it was maybe time to get another challenger.
We need to switch
Exactly. But actually, I have a question, because the title is self-custody for hippies or heroes, and I wasn't completely sure which side I would be defending, because both are kind of good. Hippies are idealists, and they are important, and heroes are important as well. So I would like a clarification.
Yeah. So maybe I will enter more clarification about that, because usually we spend our time, referencing Twitter fights, and this is actually a LinkedIn fight, where there was someone saying, well, if you are taking safe, if you are a big company like Bybit, well, we will be addressing this, and you are using open source software, you're a hippie and you are not doing things right, basically. So that was more or less the point. Well,
okay, makes sense.
So yeah, so you can definitely defend, you can see which side you defend. I guess you would probably be defending you should be more professional if you want to do self-custody, but if everybody agrees in the end, I'm fine with that as well. No, I shouldn't do that as an MC. Okay, so I will get back maybe to the first point. So we can start fighting on the very definition of self-custody, because I know that personally speaking, I have a very specific one saying, self-custody could be seen and not your key, not your coins, but myself, I would say if someone can prevent you from signing at any point, you are not in self-custody. So that's my personal view. You can probably tell what is your opinion and fight on it.
Absolutely. So I think one of the great things about this topic is that it's such a great area, and there's so many different ways it could go. And as you were saying at the beginning, could argue both sides. So I think self-custody is a bit of a dangerous label at this point, I would say. I think everyone, back to the point of not your keys, not your crypto, that in the most part has been a bit of a myopic lens and a very narrow focus on what it means to be custodial or self-custodial. And because of that, we're seeing a lot of solutions that go, here's a key share for you to hold. Now you're magically self-custodial. Congrats. I think it's not as Boolean as that. It's a bit more of a spectrum when you think about self-custody and how you can do things independently and minimize dependencies elsewhere. So I think when you look at solution saying we're self-custody because you have a key share, you don't have to ask further questions like, okay, great, where are the other key shares? Does the vendor hold them? Do they hold the policy engine, which is typically a centralized database, which decides how your keys get used or abused? If that's not in your control, then that poses some serious questions of risk as well. And then you can go even further down the stack and start asking about nodes and what components are being used. Things like Infura might be something not everyone wants to use. They may see it as a bit of a critical point and a bit of a dependency they're not happy with. So all of that is to say the assessment around what's self-custodial versus custodial, it's quite a detailed multivariate problem. And again, coming from the institutional side, we deal with a lot of security experts, InfoSec people who are asking very pointy questions, and even they struggle to make sense of various black boxes which are out there, which will lead on to another topic of transparency in the software supply chain, which we can talk about as well. But hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavor as to how I see self-custody, probably more how it's being mistermed, or a bit of a misnomer at least today. So I'll leave it there as my kind of opening position as to what is self-custody.
That was a long definition of self-custody. Mine will probably be a bit shorter. I tend to agree with Nicola. I think self-custody means you should be the only one being able to transfer and manage your assets. But that also means that no one should be able to prevent doing so. And I think I agree with Nicola, this is the component that most people forget. And for example, we see a tendency on the ecosystem now of people basically giving their key to a company that will manage their key for themselves. And even if these companies provide, great guarantees on the authorization to access these keys, they can basically plug the server off at any moment, and you're basically doomed. So I would say for me, self-custody is about I'm the only one being able to move my assets, and no one can prevent me from moving my assets. No, I do agree with you that it is a trade-off because it's actually a very complex problem. You pointed out, for example, in Fura, it is true that a lot of people use centralized RPC providers. So again, if that's your only option, they can decide not to broadcast your transaction and you're basically doomed. So there's a lot of things that come into the discussion. So it is an extremely complex problem. For example, for us at Ready, we are an application. You can say that the application can potentially provide you for transacting. That's why from day one, one of our core principles is that we should be able to disappear. And in the end, users should be in control. So again, we are providing a software, but for some reason, you can opt out of the software. If the company goes out, if the software is no longer working, there's ultimately a way for you to to being the only one transacting, controlling your asset, and opting out of the system. So it is a gray area, but we should be careful not to compromise too much. And so again, we should stick to the basic. I should be the only one being able to move my assets, and no one should be able to prevent me moving my assets. If you have that, I do believe you can make some small compromise for the sake of user experience, but ultimately these two properties should be there. So again, if the company disappears, maybe using a software that facilitates the use of your crypto, but if the company disappears, there should be a clear way for you to basically get full control without relying on the software that you were previously using.
And so this full debate, so thanks for the intro, which was a bit longer than expected, but that's okay. For the newcomers in the room, don't forget to scan the QR code to be able to vote. And maybe, this whole debate started from what happened to Bybit, actually. So they were relying on an open source self-custody solution called Safe. In the end, they lost funds because they were attacked by, very, very skilled groups, so from North Korea, which are used to pierce any kind of defense. So the usual thing we say is that if you have DPRK inside your system, you're basically done. So you can try everything you want, and it's not going to solve that. So what's your opinion on this? In your opinion, could we have done better, or do we have to move to different tools in order to protect against such attackers?
That's a very good question. I certainly don't want to pick on Safe, for example, because I do believe they are, making an outstanding job. But yes, self-custody in practice is extremely complicated. The same way it's a trade-off, I don't think there's potentially one solution fits all. So maybe for very, very large institutions, they would prefer the trade-off of, okay, maybe I'm partly giving custody to someone else because I know they're actually more secure and more expert than me. But I do believe that for individuals, this is a trade-off that we should never cross. So again, there's maybe not one solution fits all. At the same time, I do believe that we've done a very bad job on the ecosystem in terms of user experience. And it's always been like either it's self-custodial and the user experience needs to be shit, or it's custodial and you can have a good user experience. I mean, at Argent or now Ready, we've always disagreed with that. I do believe the technology enables to provide good user experience with good self-custody. But it is true that today, using a safe with a ledger, and again, I don't want to piss you off, but it is a scary experience. I mean, I'm using, ledger and a safe regularly. I'm an expert user. It's very, very complex. The information that is being displayed usually is not really helping me because I'm not completely sure of what I'm signing. There's no second channel in place, so actually I'm fully relying on the, on the front end that I'm using. So there's all these things that I really believe that we haven't gone far enough, specifically for a product like Safe. And I think that's part of the reason I was in Berlin 2 weeks ago discussing with Stefan and Lucas, and they really want to refocus on that because they realize that they've done 95% of the job, but they were maybe missing the last 5% to really provide a full self-custodial experience with a product like Safe that people can actually use it in confidence. So yeah, it is a tricky question for sure, but I really believe that the technology should enable good user experience with true self-custody, and acts like that can be prevented and should be prevented in the future.
Yeah, I think so far I would agree with most of that as well. Again, it goes back to the self-custody question and how is this hyper-focus on the keys. You keep them safe, but I think to a large part, a lot of key management, particularly when it's MPC or something else, there's quite a solved problem in isolation. And I think it's more about the system and other components around it. So again, back to Bybit in this particular example, when they're doing things like blind transaction signing, that to me, that says there's probably issues around the transaction builder and the policy engine itself in terms of how was that allowed to happen. So we focus on that for the moment. Again, any transaction you create, if you want to have like an intent-based representation of I want to send 100 of X from A to B, that's kind of the abstraction of what you should be modeling into a solution, which can then work in many different chains or many different use cases. And you want to make sure that policy engine, which effectively is your access rules or transfer rules, which are kind of the brains of the wallet in deciding how do things get moved, as we said previously, how your keys get used or abused. So I think you can think about how those are structured, and you need a solution that creates transactions natively as well, not relying, again, on extreme third-party inputs for security critical things. You should be able to create that transaction within the product and not just receive something for signing and kind of take it as gospel truth because maybe you think it was a reputable source. So that's a little bit on the blind signing, and maybe just to finish off, it is kind of crazy when we think about how people in our industry are signing things without fully understanding the contents of what they're signing. So a policy engine should safeguard you against that if it's well formed. It should be default deny. You'd have to explicitly create various flows, and it should be able to give you a very different output to someone who's doing a contract update and potentially doing some malicious things. That's very different to a very routine business as usual top up of funds from cold to hot, for example. So they should go through very different workflows when the policy engine is well formed. Then on the front end security side of things, I think this is kind of going back to the trusted display and a lot of the focus is probably on the security side today, or should be in some regards. We have concepts of things like secure software factories, and I think those principles around managing everything around source code and build pipelines and deployment and how you can have zero trust throughout the different processes that are involved in those key areas. I think that's become more and more a topic of discussion rather than just some simple, I don't know, I checked a URL or something along those lines, which we try to do with our company as well. For example, just back to the point of how could this be mitigated, you can sign releases and people can use those, or you can build from source. So we give, and we'll probably get into open source soon enough, so I won't labor the point too much. But having access to the code base definitely does help. where you can verify things before you put it into production. Again, a lot of black box based solutions out there which say, you know, trust me, I'm a security expert, whatever that means. And sometimes the assessment doesn't go too much further than that.
And yeah, we'll have close to 1 minute, I think, now, so the debate is very short. But I think something that maybe we can tackle in 30 seconds each. How do you see the economic incentives of creating those systems? I mean, if we start, for example, from open source, how do we bring an open source system to the kind of quality that you described?
Sure, yeah, so I'll carry on where I left off. On the open source very quickly. So we're not an open source product, but we're source available, which is kind of as close as you can get. As far as conferring certain things, you have read-only access, you can do minor edits to the code base and all of that. Again, part of that is transparency, it's security, you don't have to trust our audit reports, and however they might be scoped or formed, you can do everything independently, which is great. But at the end of the day, we're also running a business and we want to make sure people are not taking derivatives of our work and monetizing them separately. So we have to be cognizant of that. That's one kind of known pain point, perhaps, of the commercial model.
Maybe letting some.
And I will take the 16 remaining seconds. So first of all, I think, yeah, open source is a no-brainer. I mean, it's not a question, so that should be principle number one, because you want to have transparency and people should be able to know what they are using. No, I do believe that you can monetize if you provide a layer on top of that and you provide most value to the user. And if for some reason your product is not providing value to the user, they should be free to go and use some other software. But the core component, the secure component, should be 100% open source. And that's, again, what we've always done at Argent and Ready, is making sure everything that's on blockchain, every single smart contract is audited and open sourced. And then we provide a thin layer, which is the application, the mobile application. That's a UX front-end component. And on this one, we can monetize, for example, on swap, on transaction, and things like that. But because we are providing value to the user. And if they don't like that value, they should use another software.
Thank you. So sorry to interrupt. I mean, those debates are very short, I know, but it was interesting, and I
Very
hope,
friendly.
yeah, and I hope you know. Well, I hope you have made your opinion about who should do, I mean, self-custody. Well, I'm a bit biased again, but let's look at the votes from the public. Who has been winning? Well, I think Julien is the winner for that one. Congrats. For the
back
third
next year then.
Yeah, probably for the third year
It's
in a
like
row.
this television year, if you
was a
win,
good
you
fight.
stay.
Got to start
good.
questioning
Please.
these voting systems, I think.
Please shake hands.